I found a receipt for 2 dinners when my husband said he ate alone, so I called the restaurant. What they told me shattered my 12-year marriage, but what I did next destroyed his reputation forever. The fragments of my perfect life scattered like autumn leaves in a Pacific Northwest storm, each piece revealing a truth more devastating than the last. By the time I finished unraveling his web of lies, the man I'd trusted with my heart, my home, and my daughter's future was left with nothing but the bitter taste of his own deception. I'm Rosa, and if you're watching this, please like and subscribe to my channel and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I want to know how far this story of revenge has traveled, how many women like me have found the strength to call that number, to ask those questions, to demand the truth that was hidden behind elegant lies and expensive dinners. Because what started with a crumpled piece of paper in a blazer pocket became a symphony of justice that echoed through every corner of our small town, every corridor of his workplace, every relationship he thought he could manipulate with his silver tongue and false promises. My name is Lila, and for 12 years, I'd built my life around the quiet certainty of Ronan like a cathedral built around a cornerstone. We met in our early 20s at a rain-soaked college party in the heart of the Pacific Northwest, where the air hung thick with the scent of damp evergreens and the intoxicating possibility that life was about to unfold into something magnificent. The house party buzzed with the nervous energy of students pretending to be adults, red solo cups clutched like lifelines, music pounding through paper-thin walls that seemed to pulse with our collective heartbeats. He was the guy standing by the makeshift bar, a folding table draped with a beer-stained bedsheet, with the crooked smile that tilted just slightly to the left and the endearing habit of quoting obscure poetry when the cheap wine loosened his tongue. I remember the exact moment our eyes met across that crowded living room. He was reciting something about how love was a wild thing that couldn't be tamed, his hands gesturing expansively, dark hair falling across his forehead in a way that made my chest tighten with want. I fell hard and fast, the way you do when you're young and the world feels like it's conspiring to hand you a perfectly wrapped fairy tale, complete with a bow tied from starlight and promises. We married 3 years later in a backyard ceremony under string lights that twinkled like captured fireflies, with wildflowers braided through my hair and vows whispered like sacred secrets between two people who believed they'd found their forever. I wore my grandmother's pearl earrings and a dress I'd sewn myself, the silk whispering against my skin as I walked toward him across grass still damp with morning dew. Ronan's eyes were bright with tears when he saw me, and when he spoke his vows, promises about weathering storms and building dreams together, I believed every word with the fierce conviction of a woman who had never known betrayal. Our daughter Mira arrived 3 years later, a whirlwind of giggles and sticky fingers and endless questions about why the sky was blue and whether unicorns really existed. She glued us together even tighter, or so I thought, this perfect little person who had Ronan's dark eyes and my stubborn streak, who could make us both laugh until our sides ached with her observations about the world. She was 8 now, all elbows and knees and wild imagination, painting galaxies on construction paper and leaving trails of glitter in her wake like a tiny, terrestrial comet. But lately, the glue that had held us together had started to crack in ways so subtle I almost convinced myself I was imagining the fissures. Ronan worked long hours as a project manager for Cascade Construction, coming home with dust in his dark hair and exhaustion carved into the lines around his eyes like premature aging. His clothes smelled of sawdust and concrete, his hands rough from handling blueprints and climbing through half-finished frameworks. I'd taken a deliberate step back from my graphic design freelance career to handle the endless machinery of family life, school runs and soccer practices, parent-teacher conferences and birthday parties, the relentless cycle of meals and bedtime stories and laundry that seemed to regenerate overnight like some domestic hydra. It wasn't resentment, exactly, just a slow drift, like 2 boats untethered in fog, each floating further from the other without either captain quite realizing how vast the distance had grown. We'd argue over small things that felt enormous in the moment, forgotten anniversaries that stung like paper cuts, his phone buzzing too late at night with messages that made his face glow blue in the darkness, the way he'd started looking through me instead of at me when I spoke. But we'd always patch it up with takeout from our favorite Thai place and a movie on the couch, his arm around me while Mira dozed between us, her breathing deep and trusting. Those moments felt like proof that we were still solid, still the couple who'd promised to weather any storm. I'd rest my head on his shoulder and feel the familiar rhythm of his heartbeat, steady and reassuring as a metronome, and convince myself that marriage was supposed to have seasons, that winter always gave way to spring if you just waited long enough and held on tight enough and loved hard enough to make it through the cold. The signs were there, scattered like breadcrumbs on a trail I was too trusting to follow. But trust, I'd learned, could be a blindfold as much as a foundation, and I'd been wearing mine for so long that I'd forgotten what it felt like to really see. That Thursday night was no different from 100 others, or so I thought as I moved through our evening routine with the practiced choreography of a long marriage. Ronan had texted around 6 that he'd be late, client meeting ran over, the usual excuse delivered with the casual familiarity of words worn smooth by repetition. By 9 o'clock, the kitchen table was set with Myra's favorite mac and cheese cooling under aluminum foil, the edges crimped with the care of a mother who still believed in making ordinary moments special. I sat scrolling through parenting forums on my laptop, half distracted by articles about screen time and organic snacks, the blue light casting shadows across my face in the gathering dusk. The front door clicked open at exactly 10:17. I noticed the time because I'd been watching the clock like a hawk watches a field mouse, and there he was, loosening his tie with fingers that seemed more tired than usual, the familiar ritual of a man shedding his professional skin. He smelled faintly of garlic and red wine, scents that clung to his shirt like whispered confessions, and when he said, "Hey, love," pecking my cheek before scooping Mira up from her room for a goodnight hug, his voice carried the particular weariness that comes from a day that stretched too long. We ate in the living room while Mira dozed on the rug with her stuffed elephant, the television murmuring some true crime documentary that neither of us was really watching. "How was the meeting?" I asked, picking at my reheated pasta, the sauce thick and congealed now, unappetizing but familiar. "Brutal," he sighed, sinking into the cushions with a heaviness that seemed to encompass more than just physical exhaustion. "Client's a shark," pushed back on every timeline, questioned every detail. "Grabbed a quick bite alone at that little diner on Elm Street after, you know the one. Burger and fries. Nothing fancy." His words came easily, smoothly, like water flowing downhill, and I nodded without thinking much of it because Elm Street Diner was his go-to sanctuary for solo unwinds, greasy and comforting, the kind of place where the coffee was bottomless and the waitress called you hon and nobody expected you to be anything other than hungry and human. The next morning dawned gray and drizzly, the kind of Pacific Northwest weather that seeps into your bones and settles there like an old ache. Mira bounced off to school with her backpack bulging like a parachute, full of art supplies and dreams, and I dove into the weekend laundry routine to shake off the week's accumulated slump. Ronan's work clothes were piled in the hamper like casualties of battle, crumpled shirts and slacks stiff with dried mud, the detritus of a man who worked with his hands and came home wearing the evidence. I sorted them methodically, the hum of the washing machine providing a white noise lullaby that usually soothed my scattered thoughts. As I shook out his navy blazer, the one he wore to important meetings, the one that made him look distinguished and successful, something fluttered to the floor like a dying butterfly, a small, crisp rectangle of paper, folded in half with the precision of someone who'd handled it carefully. I picked it up without thinking, unfolding it with the casual curiosity of a wife who'd never had reason to question, to doubt, to fear what she might find in her husband's pockets. The receipt was from La Belle Époque, an upscale French bistro downtown that existed in a different universe from the Elm Street Diner. Not just a different restaurant, a different social stratum entirely, the kind of place where meals were experiences and dinner was theater. The date stamped at the top matched last night exactly, Thursday, 9:45 p.m. checkout. My eyes scanned down the itemized list like a detective reading a crime scene: 2 entrees, a ribeye steak with béarnaise sauce at $48, a pan-seared salmon with herb risotto at $42. A bottle of Pinot Noir that cost more than our weekly grocery budget. 2 glasses of sparkling water, appetizers clearly meant for sharing, escargot and a charcuterie board that painted a picture of leisurely conversation and intimate proximity. The total came to $187.43, with tip included. $187.43 for 2 dinners. Not one. My heart stuttered like an engine misfiring, a cold prickle racing up my spine like electricity finding its path to ground. I reread the receipt, willing the numbers to shift, to morph into evidence of something innocent, something explainable, anything other than what they so clearly indicated. But there it was, printed in unforgiving black ink, 2 place settings, 2 meals savored slowly under candlelight, 2 people sharing wine and conversation while I sat at home with reheated mac and cheese and a sleeping child. I folded the receipt back into my palm with trembling fingers, my mind spinning through a kaleidoscope of rationalizations that felt as flimsy as tissue paper in a hurricane. Maybe a colleague had joined him last minute, I told myself desperately. Maybe it was a client dinner, a necessary evil of business development. Maybe there was a perfectly reasonable explanation that would make me feel foolish for even questioning, for allowing doubt to creep into the sacred space where trust had lived for 12 years. But even as I constructed these fragile justifications, a darker voice whispered the question that made my stomach clench with dread: why lie? Why not just say he'd had dinner with someone? Why fabricate the story about the diner, about eating alone? I slipped the receipt into my jeans pocket and finished loading the washing machine, but the familiar rhythm of domestic routine felt hollow now, mechanical motions performed by a woman who was already beginning to understand that her world had shifted on its axis while she wasn't looking. By noon, with Ronan at work and Mira at school, the house felt too big, too empty, too full of echoes and shadows that seemed to mock my growing unease. I poured coffee with hands that shook despite my attempts at composure and sat at the kitchen island, staring at the paper like it was a venomous creature that might strike if I looked away. That afternoon crawled by with the agonizing slowness of waiting for test results or jury verdicts. My design client emailed about logo revisions, but the computer screen blurred every time I tried to focus, the familiar creative process feeling foreign and impossible when my mind was elsewhere, picking apart conversations and memories like a forensic investigator examining evidence. Instead, I paced through our house, the house we'd chosen together, painted together, filled with furniture and memories and the accumulated artifacts of a shared life, replaying his words from the night before with the obsessive attention of someone studying a foreign language. Grabbed a quick bite alone. The casualness of the lie now felt like a slap, each word chosen with deliberate precision to misdirect and deceive. I thought of all the times I'd dismissed the whisper of intuition, those moments when something felt off but I'd pushed the feeling down like a jack-in-the-box that kept trying to spring open. The late nights he'd blamed on traffic that shouldn't have existed. The way his eyes would dart away when I asked about his day, as if he were consulting an internal script before responding. The gradual cooling of affection that I'd attributed to the natural evolution of long marriage, the comfortable settling that happens when passion gives way to partnership. By evening, Mira was home and chattering about art class finger paints that looked like galaxy explosions, her enthusiasm infectious enough to pull me into the present moment despite the storm clouds gathering in my chest. I helped her with math homework, forcing smiles over chicken nuggets and apple slices, but my mind was elsewhere, counting hours and calculating possibilities. Ronan texted at 6, running late again. Love you. No mention of dinner plans, no explanation of where he was or when he'd be home. I replied with a heart emoji, my thumb hovering over the call button before I deleted a half-typed message asking where he was, what he was doing, who he was with. He walked in at 8:30 carrying a takeout bag from our favorite Thai place, the familiar logo swinging from his hand like a peace offering. Figured we'd keep it easy tonight, he said, grinning as he unpacked pad CEW and spring rolls, the containers releasing clouds of aromatic steam that usually made my mouth water. Mira squealed with delight, and we ate cross-legged on the living room floor like a makeshift picnic, the domestic scene so normal and sweet that for a moment I almost convinced myself I was overreacting. But as he reached for seconds, loading his plate with noodles and vegetables with the satisfied appetite of a man who definitely hadn't eaten an expensive dinner just hours before, I couldn't hold the words in any longer. So, last night, I started, trying to keep my voice casual while my heart hammered against my ribs like a caged bird. The client meeting, how did it wrap up? You seemed pretty wiped when you got home. He nodded, mouth full of noodles, chewing with the unhurried contentment of someone with nothing to hide. Yeah, it was rough. Went on forever. But we signed the deal, thank God. Why? The question came easily, accompanied by a look of mild curiosity, as if my interest in his evening was perfectly natural and expected. Just, you mentioned stopping at the diner afterward. Sounded lonely, eating by yourself after such a long day. I watched his face with the intensity of a poker player looking for tells, searching for any flicker of recognition or guilt or fear. He shrugged with practiced ease, the gesture so natural it would have been convincing if I hadn't been holding evidence to the contrary. It was fine. Quick in and out, nothing special. Hey, can you pass the sauce? No hesitation. No stumble. No sign that he was doing anything more complicated than recounting a mundane evening. But the receipt burned in my pocket like a brand, and something inside me, something that had been solid and trusting for 12 years, cracked with an almost audible snap. Trust, I realized with crystalline clarity, was fragile as spun glass, and once fractured, it could never quite be whole again. That night, after Myra's bedtime story about brave princesses and hidden kingdoms, and after Ronan's shower that seemed to last longer than usual, steam billowing from under the bathroom door like smoke from a guilty conscience, I waited. I lay rigid beside him in our king-sized bed, the one we'd chosen together at that furniture store downtown where the salesman had called us the perfect couple and offered us a discount for being so obviously in love. Now the mattress felt like an ocean between us, vast and cold and impossibly deep. The digital clock on my nightstand glowed 11:47 in numbers that seemed to pulse with accusation. Ronan's breathing had settled into the deep, even rhythm of sleep, or at least the performance of sleep. I could no longer trust even something as basic as his unconscious patterns. His phone lay on the nightstand like a sleeping serpent, face down in the practiced position of someone who'd learned to hide their secrets even in slumber. The black rectangle that had once been just another piece of technology now loomed with sinister possibility. I'd never snooped before, never needed to, never wanted to cross that invisible line that separated trust from surveillance. We didn't keep secrets like that, or so I'd believed with the naive certainty of someone who'd never been given reason to doubt. Our phones had always been open books, passwords shared casually, messages read aloud when hands were busy with dishes or laundry. But trust, I was learning, could be weaponized as easily as it could be honored. I slipped the phone into my trembling hand, my heart hammering so loudly I was certain it would wake him. The screen came alive under my thumb, bright and unguarded, no passcode, no digital locks, because why would a faithful husband need to hide anything from his wife? The cruel irony wasn't lost on me, his openness was either genuine innocence or calculated manipulation, and I was about to discover which. The notifications bar sat empty, cleaned with the thoroughness of someone who understood the importance of covering tracks. But I opened his messages anyway, scrolling past our mundane thread, reminders about milk and soccer practice, the digital detritus of domestic life that now felt like artifacts from another era. Then, buried among work contacts and family group chats, I found it, a contact saved simply as Teeth Logistics. The name meant nothing at first, a generic business designation that could have been anyone. But the timestamp of the last message made my blood freeze, sent at 10:02 p.m. the night before, after he'd come home smelling of wine and lies. Last night was magic. Can't wait for round 2. The words floated on my screen like poison in clear water, followed by a kiss emoji that felt like a slap across my face. I tapped the thread with fingers that had gone numb, and weeks of exchanges unfolded before me like a roadmap of betrayal. Flirty messages that danced around explicit meaning but left no doubt about intent. Shared memes about work stress and complicated marriages. A photo of a sunset captioned "Thinking of you," sent on a Tuesday when he'd told me he was stuck in traffic. And pinned at the top of their conversation like a trophy, "La belle tomorrow?" My treat. His reply, "Perfect. See you there, beautiful." The pieces clicked together with brutal clarity. T. Logistics. Tessa Logan from Supply Chain Management. I remembered meeting her at the company holiday party last December, sharp bob haircut that framed her face like a blade, laugh like tinkling bells that commanded attention across crowded rooms, the kind of woman who moved through the world with the confidence of someone who'd never been told she was too much or not enough. Ronan had introduced her as the team wizard, and had smiled politely while she regaled us with stories about supply chain optimization, never noticing the way his eyes lingered on her gestures, the way he leaned in when she spoke as if her words were magnetic. I scrolled deeper into their digital relationship, each message a small knife twist. There were dozens more, heart eyes emojis under her selfies in red dresses that hugged curves I'd never been able to achieve after carrying Mira. His responses of stunning and can't concentrate at work that made me feel like a voyeur in my own marriage. Complaints about me disguised as confidences, how I was always tired and focused on Mira and didn't understand the pressures he was under. The most damning evidence came in screenshots, photos she'd sent of lingerie with captions like "What do you think?" and his enthusiastic responses that left nothing to interpretation. This wasn't emotional affair territory anymore. This was a full-blown relationship conducted in the shadows while I packed school lunches and attended PTA meetings, playing the role of devoted wife in a marriage that had become theater. I screenshotted everything with methodical precision, my photographer's eye automatically framing the evidence for maximum impact. Each image saved felt like a small act of rebellion, documentation that would ensure I could never be gaslit into believing I'd imagined this betrayal. Then I deleted the viewing history from his phone's recent apps, covering my tracks with the careful attention of someone who understood that knowledge was power only if it remained secret. When I slid back under the covers, the bed felt like a chasm between us, our 12 years of shared sleep now revealed as an elaborate lie. Tears burned hot tracks down my cheeks as I stared at the ceiling fan's lazy rotation, its steady were a white noise soundtrack to the destruction of everything I'd thought I knew about my life. Ronan slept on, oblivious to the fact that his wife had just discovered his other woman, his parallel life, his carefully constructed deception that had been hiding in plain sight. Sleep became a foreign concept, as elusive as trust had proven to be. I lay in the dark until dawn crept through our bedroom curtains like a reluctant witness, painting everything in shades of gray that matched my hollow exhaustion. By 7, Ronan was up and moving through our morning routine with the cheerful efficiency of a man with nothing to hide, kissing my forehead, morning, beautiful, before disappearing into his day. The casual endearment that had once made my heart flutter now felt like mockery, each syllable a reminder of how easily he could compartmentalize his deceptions. Myra's school bus honked outside at precisely 7:45, and I hugged her goodbye with a desperation that made her squirm in my arms. "You're squishing me, Mommy," she laughed, but I held on for an extra moment, breathing in her strawberry shampoo scent and the innocence that still existed in our home, untouched by adult betrayals and broken promises. Alone with my discoveries and the weight of what came next, I brewed tea strong enough to stir paint, the bitter black liquid matching my mood as I pulled up my laptop with the grim determination of a detective assembling a case. First stop, La Belle Époque's website, where elegant fonts and seductive photography painted a picture of romantic dining and intimate conversation. The kind of place where proposals happened and anniversaries were celebrated, where couples shared wine and whispered secrets over candlelit tables. Reservations recommended for the ultimate dining experience, the homepage proclaimed, and I clicked through gallery images of corner booths draped in shadows and privacy, crystal glasses catching soft light, couples leaning close over plates of artfully arranged food. This wasn't grabendo dining, this was theater, performance, seduction served with a side of béarnaise sauce. I picked up my phone with hands that trembled despite my attempts at composure, dialing the restaurant's number with the careful precision of someone defusing a bomb. Each ring felt like a countdown to revelation, and when a polished voice answered, "La Belle Époque, this is Madison, how may I assist you?" I took a steadying breath and slipped into character. "Good morning," I said, injecting my voice with the warm professionalism I'd learned from years of client calls. "I'm calling to verify a reservation from last Thursday evening, under the name Ronan Hale? Around 8 p.m.? The lie came easily, lubricated by necessity and the strange calm that comes from standing at the edge of a cliff, ready to jump. Keys clacked on the other end, efficient and businesslike. "Yes, ma'am, I have that here. Table for 2 at 8:15. Is everything all right with your booking?" The casual confirmation hit like a physical blow, but I forced my voice to remain steady. "Oh, everything was perfect," I managed, surprised by how normal I sounded when my world was cracking apart. "I was just curious about the ambience. Was the restaurant busy that evening?" Fishing for details felt like underwater archaeology, searching for artifacts in the wreckage of my marriage. Madison's laugh was light and professional. "Intimate as always, Thursday evenings tend to be quieter, more romantic. Your party seemed to really enjoy the corner booth we reserved for you. Very private, very cozy." The words "your party" landed like acid on an open wound. She was speaking as if I'd been there, as if I'd been part of this romantic tableau instead of sitting home with leftover mac and cheese. And my companion? I pressed, hating myself for the question but needing to know. Did they seem to enjoy themselves as well? Another pause, this one longer and more cautious. I'm sorry, but we have a strict privacy policy about discussing our guests. I hope you understand. Professional discretion that protected the guilty and punished the innocent, leaving me with fragments and implications instead of the full picture I craved. I hung up with pulse hammering against my eardrums, the confirmation settling in my chest like lead. Private booth. Intimate atmosphere. A romantic dinner for two while I'd waited at home like a fool, believing in business meetings and solo dinners at greasy diners. The pieces clicked together with ugly clarity, each detail another nail in the coffin of my trust. The morning stretched ahead like a minefield, each moment requiring careful navigation as I waited for the right opportunity to strike. I needed Tessa's voice, her confession, her unwitting admission of guilt that would transform my suspicions into undeniable truth. The screenshots were damning, but they could be explained away or dismissed as misunderstandings by a skilled manipulator. What I needed was her voice on record, her words captured and preserved like evidence in amber. I waited until Myra's lunch hour, when she'd be safely contained in her school cafeteria with chicken nuggets and apple juice, and when Ronan would be buried in afternoon meetings that would keep him away from his phone and unable to warn his accomplice. My hands shook as I pulled up Tessa's contact information, helpfully saved in Ronan's phone as T logistics, though I now knew the only thing she was coordinating was the systematic destruction of my marriage. The recording app on my phone started with a soft chime, a digital witness to whatever was about to unfold. I dialed her number with the methodical precision of someone loading a weapon, each digit another step toward the reckoning that had been building since I'd found that receipt in his blazer pocket. Hello? Her voice was smooth and surprised, carrying the slight confusion of someone receiving an unexpected call from an unknown number. No caller ID block on my end, why would there be? I was the wife, the legitimate party in this triangle, the one person who had every right to call and demand answers. Hi, Tessa, I said, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening in my chest. This is Lila, Ronan's wife. The silence that followed was thick as fog, pregnant with guilt and calculation. I could practically hear her mind racing, scrambling for the right response, the appropriate level of surprise or confusion. When she finally spoke, her voice had changed, becoming smaller and more careful. Lila? Oh. Hi. How did you get this number? That doesn't matter, I said, surprised by the steel in my own voice. What matters is last night. La Belle Époque. 2 dinners, 2 glasses of wine, intimate corner booth. He told me he ate alone at a diner. Another silence, longer this time, and then a sigh that sounded like air escaping from a punctured tire. When she spoke again, the pretense was gone, replaced by resignation that confirmed everything I'd feared. We didn't mean for it to. Save it, I cut her off, the words coming out sharper than I'd intended. Just tell me how long. She hesitated, and I could imagine her calculating damage, wondering how much I already knew, how much she could still conceal. 3 months, she said finally, the words tumbling out like confessions at a revival meeting. Maybe 4. It started as late-night work chats, you know? Just venting about deadlines and difficult clients. Then coffee meetings to discuss projects. Then, dinner. The progression she described was textbook emotional affair escalation, the kind of slippery slope that therapists warned about and wives feared. He said things were rough at home, she continued, and each word felt like a betrayal doubled. That you two were more like roommates than partners, ships passing in the night. He felt trapped, invisible. He said he was thinking about leaving. Invisible. The word hit like a physical blow, knocking the breath from my lungs. Me, invisible? The woman who'd put her career on hold to support his ambitions, who'd memorized his coffee order and his favorite ties, who'd spent 12 years building a life around his needs and preferences. Did he mention our daughter? I asked, my voice barely controlled. Mira? Yes, of course, Tessa said quickly, as if mentioning my child could somehow mitigate the horror of what she'd been doing. He adores her, talks about her constantly. Said you're a wonderful mother, but that your marriage had become about co-parenting instead of partnership. He felt like a stranger in his own home. The audacity was breathtaking. Here was my husband, painting me as a neglectful wife to justify his affair while I sacrificed my professional ambitions to create the stable home life he claimed to want. Did he also mention the mortgage we refinanced last year? I asked, anger beginning to burn through the numbness. The equity line he tapped for business investments that never seemed to materialize? Confusion crept into her voice. What? No, he said finances were tight because of your spending, art supplies, expensive classes for Mira, designer clothes you didn't really need. More lies, layered thick as frosting on a poisonous cake. My expensive art supplies were basic watercolors from the craft store, Myra's classes were community center offerings that cost $30 a session, and my wardrobe consisted mainly of Target basics and hand-me-downs from my sister. Tessa, I said, my voice taking on the tone I used when Mira had been caught in a lie, he's married. To me. With a child who loves him. Whatever fairy tale he's been spinning about our marriage, it's bullshit designed to make you feel better about sleeping with someone else's husband. I know, she whispered, her voice cracking like thin ice. God, I know. Last night, after dinner, when he got that panicked look checking his phone, he said you'd texted asking where he was. That's when I started thinking maybe this was more real than I wanted to admit. But the devastating blow was still coming, and when it landed, it knocked me sideways with its calculated cruelty. He said you cheated first, Tessa continued, her words coming faster now as if speed could somehow soften their impact. Years ago, with some guy from your old design firm. He showed me the receipt once, expensive Italian place, 2 dinners, bottle of wine. Said it broke him, that he'd never been able to trust you completely after that. That this thing with me was just evening the score. The memory hit like lightning. 5 years ago, a professional networking dinner with my former boss and 3 other colleagues. A group meal to discuss a potential freelance contract, completely innocent and thoroughly documented in emails I'd shown Ronan when he'd found the receipt and made his accusations. We'd fought about it, but I'd thought we'd resolved it, moved past his momentary jealousy and suspicious mind. He showed you a photo too, didn't he? I asked, pieces clicking together with horrible clarity. Yes, she gasped. You and some guy at what looked like a company party, arms around each other, looking very close. The holiday party group photo. A dozen employees lined up for the traditional year-end picture, arms linked in a friendly conga line. Ronan had taken that innocent image and weaponized it, turning professional camaraderie into evidence of infidelity. He'd built an entire mythology around my supposed betrayal, using it to justify his own while playing the victim so convincingly that his mistress felt sorry for him. That was a lie, I said, my voice breaking despite my efforts to stay strong. A professional dinner with colleagues, a group photo at a company party. He knows that. He's always known that. The revelation hung between us like smoke from a 3-alarm fire, thick and choking and impossible to ignore. Betrayal twice over, not just the affair, but the elaborate mythology he'd constructed to excuse it, the careful rewriting of our history to cast himself as the wounded party and me as the faithless wife who'd driven him into another woman's arms. The call with Tessa ended with her tearful apologies and promises to stay away, but her words echoed in the silence of my empty house like ghosts refusing to be exorcised. I sat at my kitchen table, the same table where Ronan and I had planned our future over coffee and dreams, staring at my phone's recording app with the strange detachment that comes from standing in the eye of a hurricane. The evidence was there, digital and undeniable, but evidence without strategy was just pain without purpose. I called my sister Nora within the hour, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening in my chest. She lived 20 minutes away in a craftsman bungalow that smelled of lavender and righteous indignation, and when I appeared on her doorstep with red eyes and a story that unfolded like a roadmap to betrayal, she pulled me inside with the fierce protectiveness of someone who'd spent our childhood defending me from playground bullies and teenage heartbreak. "That bastard," she said when I finished, her voice carrying the cold fury of a woman who'd divorced her own cheating husband 5 years earlier. "That manipulative, gaslighting bastard." Nora had always been the practical one, the sister who read contracts before signing and kept receipts for everything. Her divorce had been a masterclass in strategic dismantling, and she'd emerged from the wreckage with her house, her retirement account, and her ex-husband's grudging respect for her ruthless efficiency. "Lawyer first," she said, pacing her living room like a general planning a campaign. "Evidence second. Financial forensics third. Don't let him gaslight you into thinking this is fixable, Lila. He didn't just cheat, he constructed an entire mythology to justify it. That's not a mistake, that's a pattern of behavior that will repeat itself until you stop it." She connected me with her attorney, a family law specialist named Kaichin who practiced from a downtown office that overlooked the harbor. When I met him the following Monday morning, the space smelled of leather and resolution, walls lined with law books that promised justice to those brave enough to fight for it. Kai was younger than I'd expected, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and the quiet competence of someone who'd shepherded dozens of women through the particular hell of divorce proceedings. "Voice recordings are gold in this state," he said after reviewing the screenshots and audio files I'd gathered, his fingers steepled as he considered strategy. "Washington has one-party consent laws, which means everything you've collected is admissible. And with Mira involved, we prioritize custody stability above all else." He spread papers across his desk like a fortune teller reading cards, each document a weapon in the arsenal we were building. The financial investigation he ordered revealed the true scope of Ronan's deception. The equity line he'd claimed was 4 business investments had been systematically drained over the past 6 months, expensive dinners, weekend getaways to mountain cabins, jewelry purchases that had never appeared on my jewelry box. Hotel charges in cities where he'd claimed to be working, wine purchases that cost more than our monthly grocery budget, flowers ordered and delivered to addresses that weren't our home. "Classic financial infidelity," Kai explained, highlighting charges with the methodical precision of an accountant auditing embezzlement. "He's been funding this affair with marital assets, which strengthens our position considerably. We can freeze accounts, demand restitution, and use this pattern to demonstrate untrustworthiness in custody discussions. We mapped out a strategy that felt less like revenge and more like chess, each move calculated to achieve maximum impact while protecting what mattered most. Temporary separation papers that would give me legal protection. Asset freezes that would prevent further financial bleeding. Custody arrangements that prioritized Myra's stability while limiting Ronan's ability to introduce his girlfriend into her life. But the masterstroke was Kai's suggestion to create false security. "Let him think he's gotten away with it," he advised, leaning back in his chair with the satisfied air of someone who'd played this game before. "Give him enough rope to hang himself. If you confront him now, he'll go underground, delete evidence, coordinate his story with his accomplice. But if he thinks you're oblivious, he'll get careless." That's when I crafted the Nashville contract story, a fictional freelance opportunity that would require me to travel for several days, leaving Ronan free to conduct his affair in our home while I gathered evidence from a distance. I spent an entire evening creating fake emails and mock contracts, building a paper trail that would justify my absence while giving him the freedom to damn himself completely. "Revenge isn't spite," Nora said as we finalized the plan over wine at her kitchen table, the autumn rain pattering against windows like nature's approval. "It's strategy. It's protection. You're not just leaving him, you're making sure he can never do this to another woman with the same level of calculation and cruelty." The plan felt like armor, each element designed to protect Mira and me while exposing the full scope of Ronan's betrayal. This wasn't about destruction for its own sake, it was about justice, accountability, and ensuring that the man who'd spent months rewriting our marriage history couldn't control the narrative of our ending. The private investigator came recommended through Kai's network, a woman named Sarah Martinez who specialized in domestic cases with the particular blend of discretion and ruthlessness that the situation demanded. We met at a coffee shop downtown, a deliberately public place where our conversation would appear innocuous to any observer, just two women discussing business over lattes and shared concerns about Seattle's endless drizzle. Sarah was nothing like the grizzled detective I'd imagined, mid-40s with graying hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, wearing jeans and a fleece jacket that made her look like any suburban mother picking up groceries. But her eyes held the sharp intelligence of someone who'd spent years documenting the ways people betrayed each other, and when she reviewed my evidence with the methodical attention of a forensic analyst, I knew I'd found the right ally. "Standard surveillance package," she explained, sliding a contract across the small table. "Digital monitoring, physical observation, financial forensics. Your husband's pattern suggests he'll escalate once he feels secure, especially if he believes you're out of town and unavailable to surprise him. That's when people get sloppy, careless about covering their tracks." The equipment she described sounded like something from a spy movie: voice-activated recording devices small enough to hide behind picture frames, GPS trackers that could be discreetly attached to vehicles, software that could monitor text messages and social media activity in real time. All of it legal, she assured me, as long as the surveillance took place in my own home and on devices I had legal access to. "The goal is comprehensive documentation," Sarah continued, her voice taking on the professional tone of someone discussing a business strategy rather than the destruction of a marriage. "Not just the affair itself, but the financial fraud, the emotional manipulation, the systematic deception. By the time we're finished, there won't be any aspect of his behavior that can be disputed or minimized." She helped me plant recording devices throughout our house with the precision of someone staging a theatrical production. Tiny microphones hidden behind family photos that would capture intimate conversations. Motion-activated cameras positioned to document who came and went in my absence. Financial monitoring software that would track every purchase, every transfer, every attempt to hide assets or move money. The digital surveillance felt like the most invasive violation: installing tracking software on the laptop we shared, setting up monitoring protocols for our joint email accounts, creating mirrors of his social media activity that would preserve evidence even if he tried to delete it later. Each installation felt like another small betrayal of the trust that had once defined our marriage, but I reminded myself that trust was a luxury I could no longer afford. "Documentation is everything in family court," Sarah explained as we tested the final pieces of equipment. "Judges see emotional affairs and financial infidelity all the time, but it's the pattern of deception that really impacts their decisions. The lies about business trips, the manipulation of joint finances, the gaslighting about your supposed affair, that shows character, not just mistake." The social media manipulation was particularly elegant in its simplicity. Sarah created fake accounts that would friend both Ronan and Tessa, giving us insight into their public communications while encouraging them to document their relationship with photos and posts that would become evidence. People in the throes of affair fog, she explained, had a tendency toward digital exhibitionism, sharing their happiness without considering future consequences. By the time we finished, our house had become a surveillance installation disguised as a home, every room equipped to capture the truth that had been hiding in plain sight. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was turning our sanctuary into a trap, but sanctuaries built on lies were just elaborate stage sets anyway, beautiful facades hiding rot underneath. The week leading up to my fictional Nashville trip required the kind of performance skills I'd never known I possessed, each day a masterclass in deception that felt both empowering and nauseating. I researched graphic design firms in Tennessee until I could speak knowledgeably about Music City's creative landscape, crafted fake contracts with payment schedules and project timelines that would justify a 4-day absence, even practiced responses to questions about hotel recommendations and flight departure times. Ronan took the bait with an eagerness that would have been comical if it weren't so devastating. "For days," he said when I announced the opportunity over dinner, his voice carefully modulated to suggest mild disappointment rather than barely contained excitement. "That's a long time to be away from Mira." The concern for our daughter was touching in its hypocrisy, considering he'd been planning to conduct his affair in her home, around her toys and artwork and the innocent evidence of childhood that should have been sacred. "It's a huge opportunity," I replied, letting exhaustion color my voice as if this fictional contract was both blessing and burden. The kind of client that could lead to more work, maybe even a retainer relationship. We could use the money. The financial angle was calculated to appeal to his guilt about the equity line hemorrhaging, money he'd stolen from our family's security to fund romantic dinners and weekend getaways with his mistress. Sarah's surveillance confirmed that Tessa had requested the same days off work, citing a family emergency that required her immediate attention. The coordination was so transparent it would have been amateur hour if they'd been criminals instead of adulterers, but a fair fob had a way of making intelligent people stupid, turning careful professionals into reckless teenagers who believed they were the first people in history to discover the intoxicating thrill of forbidden love. My neighbor Mrs. Hoffman became an unwitting ally in the operation, a retired teacher with sharp eyes and too much time who'd always been curious about the comings and goings on our quiet street. I mentioned my upcoming business trip during one of our front yard conversations about the unseasonably warm October weather, letting slip that I was concerned about leaving Ronan alone for so long when he'd been working such stressful hours. "Oh, don't you worry about a thing," she said, adjusting her gardening gloves with the satisfied air of someone being entrusted with important responsibility. "I'll keep an eye on the house, make sure everything's secure. You know how I am about neighborhood watch." Mrs. Hoffman's vigilance was legendary. She could provide detailed reports about mail delivery times and garbage pickup schedules, so documenting an affair would be well within her skill set. The legal documents Kai prepared sat in my desk drawer like weapons in an armory, each page a calculated strike against the mythology Ronan had constructed around our marriage. Temporary restraining orders that would keep him away from our joint accounts. Custody papers that prioritized Myra's stability while exposing his unfitness as a reliable parent. Financial disclosures that documented every cent he'd stolen from our family to fund his betrayal. But the element I was most proud of was the media strategy Sarah had suggested, a comprehensive plan to ensure that Ronan's professional reputation suffered consequences proportional to his personal failures. Screenshots prepared for strategic sharing with his colleagues at Cascade Construction. Documentation that would find its way to industry contacts who valued integrity in their business relationships. A careful campaign to ensure that the man who'd spent months lying to his wife would find lying to clients and coworkers significantly more difficult. "The goal isn't destruction for its own sake," Sarah explained as we finalized the timing. "It's accountability. Men like your husband rely on compartmentalization. They separate their personal failures from their professional identities, believing they can be dishonest at home while maintaining credibility at work. Breaking down those compartments is often the only way to create real consequences." The financial safeguards activated on the morning of my fake departure, automatic transfers that would protect our joint savings while preventing Ronan from accessing funds that could be used to further his affair or hide assets in preparation for divorce proceedings. Every account, every investment, every shared asset would be frozen in time, preserving evidence while preventing further damage. The hardest part was explaining my absence to Mira without lying to her the way her father had been lying to me. "Mommy has to go help some people with their art projects," I told her as I packed a suitcase with clothes I wouldn't actually wear on a trip I wouldn't actually take. "It's only for a few days, and Daddy will take good care of you." The irony of trusting him with our daughter's physical safety while documenting his failure as a trustworthy partner wasn't lost on me, but Ronan had never been anything but devoted to Mira, even if his devotion to our marriage had proven to be performance art. Standing in our bedroom on that Thursday morning, suitcase staged by the door and recording devices hidden throughout our home, I felt the strange calm that comes from standing at the edge of a precipice with wings strapped to your back. I wasn't just leaving Ronan, I was dismantling the elaborate construction of lies he'd built around our marriage, exposing the foundation of deception that had been supporting our life together for months. The woman who walked out that door was different from the one who'd found a receipt in a blazer pocket just weeks before. I'd evolved from victim to strategist, from betrayed wife to architect of justice, from someone who trusted blindly to someone who documented everything. Revenge, I'd learned, wasn't about destruction, it was about truth, consequences, and ensuring that the people who shattered your life faced appropriate accountability for their choices. Thursday evening arrived with the weight of inevitability, autumn clouds gathering over Seattle like witnesses to the drama about to unfold. I sat in Mrs. Hoffman's living room, her lace curtains providing the perfect veil for surveillance while she bustled around making tea and arranging cookies as if we were hosting a book club instead of documenting adultery. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was about to watch my marriage end from across the street, a spectator to the destruction of my own life. "He's home," Mrs. Hoffman announced with the efficiency of an air traffic controller, peering through her binoculars with the focused intensity of someone who'd been preparing for this moment her entire nosy life. "Parking in the driveway instead of the garage, that's unusual. And he's got flowers. Red roses, looks like a dozen." My stomach clenched as I watched Ronan emerge from his truck, moving with the spring in his step that I recognized from our dating days, when anticipation made him light on his feet and quick to smile. He was wearing the navy shirt I'd bought him for our anniversary last year, the one that brought out his eyes and made him look distinguished. The fact that he'd chosen to wear my gift while entertaining his mistress in our home felt like a particular kind of cruelty, a detail so psychologically precise it could have been scripted. Sarah's voice crackled through the wireless earpiece, her surveillance team positioned at strategic points around our neighborhood like pieces on a chessboard. Target 2 approaching from the east. Black sedan, license plate matches the registration we pulled for Tessa Logan. Even in the gathering dusk, I could see her through Mrs. Hoffman's high-powered binoculars, hair freshly styled, wearing a red dress that hugged her curves with predatory confidence. She moved up our front walkway like she owned it, like she was coming home instead of invading someone else's sanctuary. The recording devices hidden throughout our house transmitted their conversation with crystalline clarity, each word a nail in the coffin of any remaining hope for reconciliation. But what I heard wasn't just the expected intimacy of lovers reunited, it was something far more devastating, a conspiracy that went beyond simple adultery into the realm of calculated theft. "The refinancing papers came through," Ronan's voice said, transmitted through speakers that turned Mrs. Hoffman's living room into mission control for my own destruction. "Another 100,000 against the house. Lila signed without even reading them, trusts me completely." His laughter had an edge of contempt that made my hands shake with rage. "And the business accounts?" Tessa's voice, smooth and calculating, the sound of someone who viewed my financial ruin as a professional challenge to overcome. "Clean transfers every week. She thinks I'm investing in equipment upgrades, but it's all going into the offshore account we set up. By the time she figures out what's happening, we'll be in Costa Rica with enough money to start fresh." The casual way he discussed stealing our daughter's college fund, our retirement savings, the equity in the home where Mira had taken her first steps, was breathtaking in its sociopathic calculation. Mrs. Hoffman gasped, her teacup rattling against its saucer. "That monster," she whispered, her voice carrying the outrage of someone who'd lived through the Depression and understood the sanctity of family finances. "He's not just cheating, he's robbing you blind." The conversation continued, each revelation more damaging than the last. They discussed forged documents, manipulated bank statements, the systematic liquidation of assets I'd helped build over 12 years of marriage. Tessa had connections at a private bank in the Cayman Islands, expertise in international money laundering that she was applying to the destruction of my family's financial security. This wasn't a crime of passion, it was a planned heist with my marriage as collateral damage. "The custody evaluation is next week," Ronan continued, his voice taking on the calculating tone I'd once mistaken for professional competence. "I've been documenting everything, her mood swings, the way she's been distant and distracted lately. With the right lawyer, I can paint her as an unfit mother, get primary custody, and eliminate the child support obligations entirely." The breathtaking audacity was almost admirable in its scope. Not content with stealing my money and breaking up our family, he was planning to take Mira away from me too, using my natural response to his betrayal as evidence of my inadequacy as a mother. The man I'd trusted with my heart, my home, and my child was systematically dismantling every aspect of my life with the methodical precision of a demolition expert. Sarah's voice in my ear was tight with professional fury. "We're getting all of this, every word. Financial fraud, custody manipulation, international money laundering, this goes way beyond simple adultery. We've got them on federal crimes now." Through the window, I watched them toast their success with champagne stolen from our own wine cellar, crystal glasses catching the light from candles that had witnessed our anniversary dinners and birthday celebrations. They were celebrating the destruction of my life in the sanctuary I'd created, using the tools of our happiness to commemorate my betrayal. The recordings would be enough to destroy them both, but I wanted more than just legal victory. I wanted the kind of public humiliation that would ensure they never forgot the consequences of their choices. Friday morning broke gray and merciless, Seattle's perpetual drizzle providing the perfect soundtrack for digital warfare. I sat in a coffee shop downtown, laptop open, surrounded by the mundane bustle of people living honest lives, students cramming for exams, business meetings over lattes, couples sharing croissants and making plans that didn't involve stealing from their families. The contrast between their innocence and the evidence files spread across my screen felt surreal, like editing a horror movie in a children's library. Sarah had compiled everything into a multimedia presentation that would have impressed Madison Avenue executives, audio recordings synced with timestamps, financial documents highlighted to show the money trail, screenshots arranged chronologically to demonstrate the evolution from emotional affair to criminal conspiracy. The package was comprehensive, devastating, and absolutely irrefutable. "The key is strategic release," Sarah explained over our secure video call, her voice carrying the satisfaction of someone who'd spent a career exposing liars and cheats. "We don't want a scattered approach, we want maximum impact with minimal opportunity for damage control. They need to wake up to a new reality where everyone they know, work with, and depend on understands exactly who they are." The first strike was surgical, an email to the Human Resources Department at Cascade Construction, delivered at 8 a.m. sharp when managers would be checking morning messages over their first cups of coffee. The subject line was professionally neutral, documentation of employee misconduct, but the contents were explosive. Audio recordings of Tessa and Ronan discussing embezzlement, screenshots showing the systematic theft of company resources for personal use, financial documents proving that business trips had been romantic getaways funded by fraudulent expense reports. "Companies have zero tolerance for this level of liability exposure," Kai had explained during our strategy session. "The financial fraud alone is grounds for immediate termination, but the combination of workplace affair and criminal conspiracy makes them toxic assets. No corporation wants employees who view fraud as a creative problem-solving exercise." The second wave targeted their social circles with the precision of a sniper's bullet. Facebook posts shared to mutual friends, community groups, professional associations, not vindictive rants, but calm, factual presentations of documented evidence. Screenshots of their romantic texts juxtaposed with bank statements showing stolen money. Audio clips of them laughing about my gullibility paired with photos of Mira at school events where she'd asked why Daddy worked so many late nights. Mrs. Hoffman proved to be an unexpected ally in the community exposure campaign, her network of neighborhood watch volunteers and retired teachers spreading the story with the efficiency of a wire service. "Everyone needs to know what kind of people they are," she declared over coffee and righteous indignation. "That poor little Mira, and you working so hard to build a life while they were plotting to steal it all." The professional consequences cascaded like dominoes falling in slow motion. Ronan's project management certification was suspended pending investigation. Tessa's CPA license was flagged for review by the state board. Cascade Construction issued a public statement distancing themselves from employees whose personal conduct reflects values incompatible with our corporate culture. The language was corporate and sanitized, but the message was clear: their careers were over. The most satisfying element was watching their attempts at damage control crumble in real time. Ronan's frantic phone calls to colleagues who'd already seen the evidence. Tessa's LinkedIn profile hastily updated to seeking new opportunities, as if anyone in the accounting profession would hire someone caught planning international money laundering. Their carefully constructed professional reputations evaporated like morning mist, leaving behind only the stark reality of what they'd chosen to become. The humiliation is now public and permanent, Sarah reported with clinical satisfaction. Every Google search of their names will return this story. Every background check, every job application, every attempt to rebuild their careers will be haunted by documented evidence of their choices. Throughout the digital storm, I maintained laser focus on protecting Mira from the chaos. Her school was notified discreetly, her counselor briefed on the situation, her daily routine maintained with the steady reliability that children need when their world is shifting. She knew Daddy was having work problems and that Mommy was handling some business things, but the ugly details were quarantined away from her 8-year-old understanding. The legal documentation flowed seamlessly into family court, each piece of evidence cross-referenced and authenticated. Bank accounts frozen mid-transfer, preventing the final theft of our family's financial future. Asset seizure orders that turned their escape plan into a legal noose. What had started as documentation of an affair had evolved into a federal case involving fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy charges that carried serious prison time. By noon on Friday, less than 24 hours after their champagne celebration, both Ronan and Tessa were unemployed, professionally ruined, and facing criminal charges that would follow them for the rest of their lives. The family court proceedings unfolded with the methodical precision of justice finally finding its rhythm, each hearing another nail in the coffin of Ronan's attempts to control the narrative or minimize the consequences of his choices. Judge Patricia Williams presided over our case with the no-nonsense efficiency of someone who'd seen every permutation of marital betrayal and had long since lost patience with elaborate justifications for inexcusable behavior. The evidence presented is comprehensive and damning, Judge Williams declared during the final custody hearing, her voice carrying the weight of absolute authority as she reviewed the mountain of documentation we'd assembled. Financial fraud, emotional manipulation, conspiracy to commit theft, these are not the actions of someone capable of providing stable guardianship for a minor child. Ronan sat beside his lawyer looking like a man who'd aged a decade in 6 weeks, his expensive suit unable to disguise the hollow-eyed desperation of someone watching their life collapse in real time. His legal team had attempted every strategy in the book, claiming the recordings were illegally obtained, suggesting I'd manipulated the evidence, even arguing that his financial crimes were somehow separate from his fitness as a father. Each argument crumbled under the weight of Sarah's meticulous documentation and Kai's surgical cross-examinations. The defendant's own words, recorded in his family home, demonstrate a pattern of deception that extends beyond marital infidelity into criminal behavior. Kai presented to the court with the calm authority of someone holding a royal flush. He expressed clear intent to steal his daughter's college fund, manipulate custody evaluations through false documentation, and flee the country to avoid consequences. This is not a man struggling with personal demons, this is a calculating predator who viewed his family as assets to be liquidated. The custody decision was swift and decisive, primary custody to me, with Ronan relegated to supervised visitation pending the resolution of his criminal charges. The financial awards were equally satisfying, full restitution for stolen funds, exclusive ownership of our family home, and child support payments that would ensure Myra's stability regardless of her father's future employment prospects. Tessa fared even worse in her own legal proceedings. Her CPA license was permanently revoked after a board investigation revealed the scope of her involvement in international money laundering schemes. The professional association that had once celebrated her rapid career advancement now used her case as a cautionary tale in their ethics seminars. She'd been forced to sell her downtown condo to pay legal fees, her carefully cultivated image as a rising star in corporate finance reduced to a Wikipedia entry under notable accounting scandals. The community support that emerged from the public exposure surprised me with its warmth and practical assistance. Other mothers from Myra's school organized meal trains and babysitting schedules. Local business owners offered freelance contracts that helped rebuild my design portfolio. Mrs. Hoffman became an unofficial grandmother figure, appearing at our door with homemade cookies and fierce protective energy whenever reporters or curious neighbors got too intrusive. You showed them that actions have consequences, explained Jennifer Morrison, a divorced mother who'd become a close friend through our shared experience of rebuilding after betrayal. Too many women suffer in silence, let their cheating husbands control the narrative and minimize the damage. You fought back with documentation and strategy instead of just tears and accusations. The deeper investigation into Ronan's financial crimes revealed patterns of behavior that extended far beyond our marriage. Previous employers reported missing funds that had never been fully investigated. Former business partners came forward with stories of manipulated contracts and mysterious disappearances of shared assets. What we'd uncovered wasn't an isolated incident but a career-spanning pattern of fraud that had finally been properly documented. The federal charges were still pending, but the evidence was overwhelming. Wire fraud, money laundering, tax evasion, charges that carried potential prison sentences measured in years rather than months. Ronan's transformation from respected project manager to federal defendant was complete, his fall from grace documented in court records that would follow him long after his eventual release. Justice, I learned, wasn't just about punishment, it was about restoration, protection, and ensuring that the people who chose to build their happiness on the destruction of others faced proportionate consequences for their choices. 6 months later, Autumn had returned to Seattle with the kind of crisp promise that made everything feel possible again. I stood in my kitchen, our kitchen, legally and definitively mine now, watching Mira arrange chocolate chips in precise patterns on cookie dough with the focused concentration of an artist creating a masterpiece. The house felt different now, lighter somehow, as if the weight of deception had been physically lifted from its foundation, leaving behind only the clean energy of honest living. "Mommy," Mira said, her serious brown eyes finding mine as she looked up from her culinary engineering project, "are you happy now?" The question came with the direct simplicity that only children possess, cutting through months of legal proceedings and social reconstruction to reach the heart of what actually mattered. I knelt beside her, brushing flour from her cheek with the kind of unhurried attention I'd forgotten I could afford when I wasn't constantly monitoring for lies and calculating emotional damage. "Happier every day, sweetheart," I said, and meant it with a completeness that surprised me. "Because we're honest with each other, because we're building something real, and because you remind me every day what love is supposed to look like." The freelance design business had exploded beyond anything I'd imagined possible during those dark days of evidence gathering and court proceedings. Word had spread through Seattle's creative community about the woman who'd fought back against financial fraud with documentation and strategy, and clients began reaching out with projects that felt more like artistic collaboration than simple commercial work. Bookstores, coffee shops, nonprofit organizations, businesses run by people who valued integrity and wanted their brands to reflect those values. "You've become a symbol," explained Maria Santos, the owner of a feminist bookstore who'd commissioned a complete brand redesign. "Women see what you did, how you refused to be a victim, how you turned evidence into empowerment, and they want to support that kind of strength." The irony wasn't lost on me that Ronan's attempt to destroy my professional life had actually catalyzed its greatest success. The framed receipt sat in my desk drawer now, not hidden but transformed, no longer evidence of betrayal but a talisman of transformation. That small piece of paper had been the first thread that, when pulled, had unraveled an entire tapestry of deception. It represented the moment I'd stopped trusting blindly and started demanding truth, the pivot point between the woman who'd accepted easy lies and the one who'd insisted on difficult honesty. Mrs. Hoffman had become an unofficial grandmother to Mira, appearing at our door with homemade soup when either of us had colds, teaching my daughter card games that required strategy and patience, sharing stories about her own late husband that painted pictures of what healthy marriages actually looked like. "Your mother," she told Mira over afternoon tea and ginger snaps, "is the strongest woman I've ever known. Remember that when you're older and someone tries to tell you that being kind means being weak." Ronan's life had taken a trajectory that served as its own form of justice. The federal charges had resulted in an 18-month prison sentence, followed by 5 years of probation and financial restitution that would ensure he spent the foreseeable future living in the kind of economic uncertainty he tried to impose on Mira and me. His supervised visits with our daughter were stilted affairs conducted in sterile visitation centers, conversations limited to safe topics that couldn't contaminate her understanding of right and wrong. Tessa had simply disappeared from Seattle's professional landscape, her LinkedIn profile deleted, her downtown social circle abandoned, her carefully constructed identity as a successful businesswoman replaced by whatever reinvention she'd managed to cobble together in some distant city where her reputation hadn't preceded her. Occasionally, mutual acquaintances would mention seeing her working retail jobs under assumed names, the kind of career reset that happens when someone's professional credibility has been permanently destroyed. Did you ever imagine it would end like this? Nora asked during one of our weekly sister dinners, gesturing around my kitchen where Myra's artwork covered the refrigerator and my design projects spread across the island like evidence of a life being actively lived rather than merely survived. I imagined survival, I admitted, watching my daughter practice piano in the living room, her small fingers finding melodies that filled our house with music instead of tension. I never imagined thriving. I thought the best I could hope for was to protect what we had left, but it turns out that breaking free from lies creates space for dreams I'd forgotten I had. The YouTube channel had grown organically from viewers who'd heard about my story through word of mouth and social media shares. Voices of Rosa had become a destination for women documenting their own journeys from betrayal to empowerment, a community where survival stories were celebrated and strategic thinking was valued over emotional reactivity. Thank you for sharing your story, read the comments that appeared daily from around the world. You showed me that I didn't have to accept being lied to. Your courage gave me permission to fight back. I found my receipt yesterday, and now I know what to do. That call to the restaurant hadn't just exposed Ronan's affair, it had exposed me to strength I'd never known I possessed. The line that broke when I dialed that number had set me free to build a life based on truth instead of convenience, documentation instead of denial, strategic thinking instead of blind trust. And if my viewers wonder what came next after that first devastating phone call? They called it right. I called, I investigated, I documented, and I discovered that the line between victim and victor is often just the courage to demand evidence instead of accepting explanations. The woman who'd found that receipt was gone forever, replaced by someone who knew that love without honesty was just performance art, and that the most powerful revenge was building a life so authentic and successful that betrayal became irrelevant. Truth, I'd learned, really could set you free, but first, it made you fight like hell for the freedom you deserved.